Today we're going to be recreating this $400 top from Urban Outfitters. I think it is a great scrap busting project, especially if you're using different fabrics together like many of these designs do. I'll be using some leftover eyelet fabric as well as using my trusty Tate romper. I did get this pattern for free because I pattern tested it. So that means they gave me the sewing pattern and I sewed it up and let them know if I saw anything that needed to be corrected before it was released. So I'll be walking you through the modifications that I made for this sewing pattern. I've now made it 3 times. First as the original, second as a dress, and now as a top. So let's get into it. This is some eyelet fabric that I purchased quite a while ago last year from Kiki's Textiles, and I used it to make a blouse, and this was my remnants, and then I'm just using some basic white fabric for my lining. Typically I use these coasters as my pattern weights, but I just bought a projector for sewing projects, so I'll have to report back on that later. This is why I keep decent sized fabric scraps when I finish a project, because when inspiration strikes, it is so nice to not have to go to the fabric store and also use up my fabric waste. I have to say, I did not enjoy cutting this fabric. This fabric has actually broken a needle on my serger because it has all those threads to give it the eyelet fabric. So that's just something to watch out for when you are working with fabric like this. I want to talk about the modification that I made in order to make this into a top, because if you're following the actual sewing pattern, it's for pants. If you are going to be converting the Tate romper into a top, it is super easy to make the modification. You are still going to cut the same amount of bodice pieces that you would for a pair of pants, right? And you're still going to follow that measurement that you used for the romper portion. But instead of cutting the whole entire pant, I just cropped the pattern where I wanted the final length of my top to be. So this is the same shape as the top of the pants before it gets into the curve for the crotch area. And here you can see I still cut 2 of them, because if you don't cut 2 of them, you won't have enough fabric to gather down. When you're creating gathers, you have to have a lot of width, more than what you're gathering down to, or else it just won't look very gathered. You always need more than you think. So that's my PSA on gathering. Okay, so I've actually had a change of plans regarding the straps. You'll see in an earlier clip, I cut out the pattern pieces for the adjustable straps, which are a bit wider than this, but this fabric has no stretch even when I cut it on the bias. So I just knew it was going to be an absolute nightmare to try and turn the strap so that the seam was on the inside. So I kind of just made these straps instead. I just cut off that little angled edge and sewed them down kind of like bias tape. The other reason of why I decided to do that is because looking at the designer top, these straps are much thinner, and that kind of, in my mind, helps contribute to like a little bit of a daintier look. So that's why I went with these instead. Then you want to carefully pin your straps, which looks a little crazy, but this is all going to get tucked in with the lining and then turned right side out. I was being really lazy and I was gonna skip this step, but I think it's important for you guys to see, especially if you've never used this technique. Not because it's difficult, but some people just don't know. So this is the inside seam, right? Lining, outside fabric, and you can already see I'm struggling to get that to lie flat so that this inside lining doesn't come up and peek around. So I'm going to use a technique called understitching, and that is where I'm going to sew the seam allowance down to the lining, and that will just make it easier to keep that seam flat when I am wearing it. Just be very careful that you don't sew onto your straps. This is definitely one of those techniques that takes your garments from looking homemade to something more professional. It's looking so cute already. Now is the most, I don't know why it's annoying. I just feel like it's annoying sometimes, but it's time to sew 2 rows of gathering basting stitches on the bodice pieces so that we can gather them down. You're just going to take these pattern pieces and sew up the side seams just like you would have to do on the pair of pants, but again, you're not working with a curve. So I'm just going to sew these right sides together, and then this will get gathered down to the bodice. And also don't forget that one of your side seams is going to have to account for a zipper opening. So the pattern does come with a notch on where you will sew that side seam. So this might be a little bit difficult if you're making this shirt more cropped than the length of the zipper needed. So just watch out for that. Here we go, it's time to gather. And with that, the rest of this comes together rather quickly. I'm just going to attach the bodice to the top, then we just have a zipper and a hem. This is one of my favorite ways to finish off the edge of a zipper. It's included in the instructions, but what's really nice for this zipper main fabric and lining is you just get to fold this down and stitch it down to the zipper tape, and then when you flip it, you get a really nice finished edge. So I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. So I have my collar stand turning tool, and here you can see this is just the lining flipped to the inside and stitched down. So now I can turn this and I get a super clean edge here. And if you need to, you can use this collar stand to kind of like get that little corner out there. But look at that nice finish there. I love that technique. I have to say, I think I kind of nailed this one. The only other modification that I would make to get even closer to the original top is to really increase the width of this bottom panel so that you get even more gathering. Because when you look at those product photos, you can really see that there's a lot of gathering that kind of pushes this out a little bit. The other thing that you could do is source more vintage fabric that has kind of more of those prints. Obviously, this is a completely different look. If you make it, please tag me so that I can see, and I will see you in the next one.